What is the good news and controversy surrounding Catherine's new video? Which knights have been attacking the royals? What has Meghan been saying to OPRAH, and why is Prince Harry back on the lawsuit roller coaster? We have got a great show coming up for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elton, and this week my panel includes the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English and her favourite sparring partner and mine, the Daily Mail's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. This is all we need, the dream team. Well, before we get into it, this is your reminder from me to join the more than 300,000 people who subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals YouTube channel. All you need to do is please click that subscribe button. It's free and it ensures that you get a reminder every time there's a new episode. Well, there's so much to discuss, particularly about Catherine and both the joy and controversy over her video, but we'll start with maybe, I think, our favourite video of the week, King Charles and the New Zealand women's rugby team. Let's watch that now.
Yeah, we all wanted a hug, but only if it was okay with
Hug?
you. Yeah.
Why not?
Richard, what was the occasion?
I love this. This was the women's rugby team from New Zealand who are playing England this Saturday. And I think the King invited them to Buckingham Palace because partly I think he was keen to sort of apologise, really, because he wanted to say sorry that he's not going to be able to visit New Zealand as part of his tour down under.
Oh, that's nice.
When he goes to Australia. Yeah, so I think for that reason he felt a bit emotional, because I'm sure he was very keen to go to New Zealand. And yeah, someone seized the opportunity to say, can I have a hug? And then they seem to have sort of enveloped him in a rugby scrum, shall we say.
What a bold move. I mean, that is quite bold, because obviously the protocol exists around not touching the royals. Do you think there were some panicking palace officials, or?
I don't know. I love the expression on his face, and he did say afterwards that he felt it was very healing. And my first reaction was, isn't this lovely? But I must admit, after, I did worry, because remember that the King is still undergoing cancer treatment, and so his immunity levels may be down and that sort of thing. So you would expect him to be kind of avoiding too many germs, but
there is also, I don't want to be flip, but things like hugging are emotional healing tools. I think that's really nice.
Yeah, the delighted expression on his face, it looked like it did him good. So let's hope it did.
Rebecca, inevitably there is always discussion around royal protocol when this stuff happens, but it does seem that the modern royals are just more relaxed.
Yeah, and I tell you what was lovely about this video is when they said, can we have a hug? You heard the King go, why not? And he had the biggest grin on his face. I thought it was really adorable. And actually your question to Rich about whether panicking officials, I could recognise a lot of people. I wasn't there last night, but I could recognise a lot of the officials in the background that I know, and they were all laughing their heads off. So I think it went down very well. And actually one of the players who wasn't close enough to hug him went, oh, can I have one too? And he was like, come on.
You preempted my next question, isn't it? It does not run the risk of everybody just expecting to be allowed to hug the King.
Yes, but I think, it was a particular set of circumstances, and obviously they're used to doing rugby scrums, and he was joking afterwards. It was like, I felt like I was in a scrum, and was talking about the position he played in rugby when he was at school. But in answer to your question about protocol, I've always said there's so much more relaxed nowadays. I think you have to pick your moments and pick your person. Even towards the end of her life, although Queen Elizabeth had a great sense of humour, do you remember she had that amazing Bond skit with the London Olympics? She wasn't the kind of person you would all bundle round and give a hug. But, there were things she was more relaxed about as well. And actually, this is kind of the King Charles that I see when we're out on engagements and on royal tours. And I think it's quite nice that other people are seeing it too.
But it does put him in an awkward position, when he's down under and he's meeting the crowds and someone says, oh, can I have a hug?
And the Aussies will not be backward in coming forward.
That's what I mean. What does he then say? Does he say, well, no, actually? I think maybe he just needs to sort of chuckle a bit and move on.
Well, I've mentioned it before, but there's, of course, Australia was host to one of the biggest protocol controversies when it came to contact,
yeah.
when the poor Prime Minister in the 50s touched the Queen's elbow. So that does haunt Australia as a nation.
So we've gone from
Yeah.
touching an elbow causing a scandal to full-on rugby scrums.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Isn't it? Well, the good news is they will be going to Australia, won't they, the King and Queen? Do we have any details of what they'll be doing?
Yeah, so I was in a briefing at Buckingham Palace earlier on this week about it, and as we predicted, he is going to Australia, he is going to Samoa as well. Won't sadly be going to New Zealand because the doctors have said, look, that is just a bit too much, because as Richard rightly points out, he is still undergoing treatment. Now, I actually asked the question when I was at the briefing, will he still be undergoing treatment when he goes on this trip? It's a 9-day trip, it's 30,000 miles door to door. It's a long way to go. They wouldn't comment on that now. I think, we might get an update while he's there. But I think it's great news, and his schedule's packed. I mean, they have tweaked things, so there's not so many evening engagements, and he is going to have a rest day as soon as he arrives, the day after he arrives on October the 18th. But other than that, some days between them, they're undertaking 9 and 10 engagements a day. So it's kind of the royal tour schedule of old that I'm quite familiar with. I think it's pretty impressive.
I think I can't resist. I just think it's hilarious that Australia will be very, very smug about being chosen over New Zealand when one had to go.
Joe.
Sorry, New Zealand. Sorry, New Zealand. But
Can you imagine how they made that decision? It must have been
Probably flipped a coin.
excruciating. Yeah.
They did describe it in the briefing, actually, so we've had to make some difficult decisions about leaving out New Zealand, and the King made a point of saying to the New Zealand rugby players, the Black Ferns, I will get to you as soon as I can, I promise.
Yeah.
And also they've had to make some difficult decisions about in-country travel, so you would have expected him to go to some quite far-flung places in Australia as he normally does, but this trip is going to be restricted to Sydney and Canberra.
Here's an idea. How about when Catherine's better, if she makes her first trip with William to New Zealand?
That would be a good one, yeah.
that is a good idea. But then, do you think that this sort of like condensed schedule, this more relaxed schedule, do you think that the King would have welcomed that, or would it have been forced upon him?
9 engagements a day doesn't sound very relaxed to me.
Well, I mean,
exactly.
to me that sounds a lot, but the fact that that's watered down.
Yeah, I mean, he has been champing at the bit to get stuck in. In fact, throughout the feature of his whole treatment has been trying to persuade him to do less, not more. And the Queen has said to me a couple of times, kind of rolled her eyes and said, I wish he'd listened to me. But every time I see him, he looks a little bit better and a little bit better. So, I think it's probably keeping him going as well.
Yeah.
If something so drastic happens in your life, actually sometimes keeping things as normal as you can, and for him that is a punishing work schedule, actually kind of keeps your mind on the straight and narrow, I think.
Well, of course, it's never a dull moment in royal news, and despite all the jollity, Richard, the King wasn't immune to some barbs from Sir Elton John. Sir, if you don't mind.
Yes, this followed. Previously, we've have Sir Ian McKellen, the celebrated actor, who gave an interview last weekend. He was very rude. He talked about how Queen Elizabeth had been rude to him, and he said how Prince Harry was a bit of an idiot, I think, or something.
Wow.
He liked Prince Harry. I think he said he's one of the few ones he liked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He liked Prince Harry, but felt that he wasn't suited to the royal family or something.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
And was generally quite rude. Well, anyway, Elton John, not to be outdone, has followed that up by boasting about how at his civil partnership ceremony with David Furnish, he attracted a bigger crowd to Windsor than Charles and Camilla, who got married. Their ceremony was in the same place at Windsor Guildhall.
Not that he's being competitive or anything.
Now, I didn't want to take this, on face value, so we did some research, and it seems there are about 20,000 there for Charles and Camilla's wedding, so a huge crowd, and it doesn't seem like there was that number for Elton and David. But perhaps what it was that Elton said that he paid the police, he had to contribute to the cost of security. So maybe the police didn't want to miss a trick, and when they were talking about the cost, they said, "Oh, massive crowd. You'll never guess how many we had," and pumped up the price a bit. But
I'm shocked at that accusation.
Well, I might add to what Richard was saying. I was there at Charles and Camilla's wedding, standing outside.
Of course you were.
No, I knew. As soon as I said that, Joe, I knew you were going to say something sarky.
But were you there at Elton's? That's the big question.
No, well, I wasn't there at Elton's, but I was standing outside the Guildhall at theirs, and it was packed. We were like sardines, and people with flags and bunting. So I'm really sorry. I don't think he really knows what he's talking about.
Why say something like that? And you can't imagine him being that catty about the Queen, can you? Our late Queen.
No, I think it is genuinely interesting, actually, that people like Ian McKellen and Elton John made these comments now. I suppose they've both got their knighthoods, Harry...
They could be taken away.
Perhaps it's no coincidence that Elton is a close friend of Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
But I do think that, with Queen Elizabeth no longer with us, there isn't that same sort of respect
reverence
that there was. Yeah, I just think because of the Queen's great age and how long she'd been serving, she did command more respect. I think that people would have been nervous about making comments that now maybe they sort of throw out there a bit.
Well, speaking of the late Queen, Rebecca, we've just unbelievably passed the 2nd anniversary of her death. How do you think the family would have marked the occasion?
Very quietly and very somberly. I mean, because it fell on a Sunday, the King went to church to Crathy Kirk because they're up at Balmoral in Scotland, and it wasn't a special memorial service, but I spoke to the minister there who said, they made a special point of mentioning and remembering the Queen and her dignity and her duty in the address and the prayers. But then it was very much a kind of quiet day for them, which is what Queen Elizabeth did in memory of her own father, because for them as a monarch, their accession to the throne is intrinsically tied up with losing a loved one. So it's not something for them to celebrate. It's actually a very sad day for them. So then the King and Queen spent the rest of the day privately. But I was speaking to a lot of kind of Queen Elizabeth's former staff, not for a story, but just saying, how are you today? Because she was such a huge part of their lives that, they all miss her terribly. And we were kind of exchanging stories about her. And I mentioned to one of them how one of my most memorable memories of her was when I was very heavily pregnant, covering an engagement with her. And I saw her, and I don't know if I've told this tale here before, but I saw her kind of look at me out the corner of her eye, and kind of saw her look me up and down. I was the size of a house, and we had to go up some stairs, and I saw her just go like that and hold somebody back, because I had to walk up the stairs in front of her and get up to the top before she went to the next level. And I could just see woman to woman, she was like, I can just see this young lady needs a little bit more time to get up the stairs. And when I mentioned this story to somebody, someone said that's exactly what she was like. She wouldn't make a fuss, but she was very people orientated, and she was very like that with her staff, very caring and very thoughtful. So yeah, special lady, and some lovely memories on a difficult day.
Syrian, so not rude. Not rude.
Yes, exactly.
Lovely. Well, this seems like a good time to mention that we put out a special marathon episode of Palace last week, where we revisited the series of special programs we put out around the death of Her Majesty. Check that one out after this one if you missed it. Now, Rebecca, back to you. William was out and about this week. What was he doing?
Yeah, William's been very busy this week. In fact, actually, as we're recording this now, he's attending the Sovereign Parade at RAF Cranwell on behalf of the King. And my understanding is he's still got that summer beard that's getting ever bigger.
I like the beard.
I did wonder if, because it was a military event, he'd have to shave it off, but obviously not.
No, so. I'm very pro-beard.
Is it a beard? It seems to be sort of in transition, I think. It's not clear if he's, aiming for a bushy beard.
Yeah,
or
it doesn't need to get
stubble.
much bigger, I think. What do you think? How bushy can your beard get?
I'm not growing a beard, no, but maybe if William looks good, maybe I'll follow his example.
Come on, we just want to see how that turns out.
But so far it looks more like stubble rather than
I like it.
I like it. I think it looks good, actually, and I think it's a bit different.
Well, of course, he's had one before. He had one, when he was in North Wales in the past.
Yes, and when
bushy.
when he did a kind of placement with the Navy, he grew it, and there was a huge flurry of interest when he turned up to church at Sandringham on Christmas Day, wearing it. And yeah, the beard was in evidence earlier this week because he was in Wales undertaking 3 engagements. And I know we'll get on to speaking about Catherine later, but the crowds were really out in force for him in Wales, and people had a lot of good wishes for Catherine. They wanted to pass on cards, letters, and even some friendship bracelets from some children, which he promised he would give to his own 3 children, but said he might have to keep them away from Louis because Louis often tries to nick his sister's things, which I thought was very sweet. He seemed in really, really good form this week, I have to say.
Well, Richard, the outing does come at a happy time for the family, doesn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, essentially, it's a time of great relief because Catherine's announced, in her video that she's completed her course of chemotherapy.
Yeah.
I remember she'd announced it in that earlier video back in March. So it's been a long haul, 6 months of what has. I mean, she didn't give details, but clearly it's been a grueling, difficult time for the family. So I think everyone is delighted that that's over, and now it's just a question of the regular checkups and hoping that that she's got the all clear.
Absolutely. And Rebecca, the piece you wrote earlier in the summer seemed to have come true.
Yeah, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned in the summer, and it's pretty much all of it's been confirmed in the briefing we had from Kensington Palace this week, and then the Princess's own video, that it's good news, as Richard says. She's finished her chemotherapy, but as she herself said, and William emphasised this week, there is still a long road ahead of them. She's still undergoing some kind of medical treatment, and I think there's a lot for her to get her head around as well. She's had, she's only 42, and she's had a brush with a very serious illness. It's affected her, it's affected the family. She said it's been a very, very scary time for them.
Yeah.
And as I said in my piece earlier on this year, when she comes back to official duties, it will be few and far between to start off with. She's still going to work from home. As I predicted, she's confirmed that she will attend the cenotaph, but I think they'll be quite picky in their engagements for her. I suspect we will see her in public properly, I think, in the next couple of weeks.
Perhaps she will undertake more if she's feeling better.
And that's the point they made
Yes.
when I was talking to Kensington Palace. They said, look, you've got to bear with us, guys, because we probably won't announce things until the last minute, because it really does depend on how she is near the time, and I think everyone understands that.
Absolutely. Well, now don't think that that's all we've got to say on this subject. We'll have much more on this and the controversy surrounding the video after we hear some of your comments. And we'll start with a comment from Annette, who wrote after the commemorative show dedicated to the late Queen that I mentioned just now. Don't forget to check that one out later if you missed it. She said, I'm German, and for some reason, I've always been a huge fan of the Queen and the royal family. I cried so much during the broadcast of her funeral and started even welling up again while watching this video. The Queen was a truly special person, and I will never forget her. While Maria Bunch wrote in after we talked about last week about Prince William's reluctance to wear a kilt. She said, kilts are just as appropriate now as they were 50 years ago. Wearing the kilt shows respect for Scottish culture. Quite right. And we also discussed how Harry would still like an apology from William if they're ever to make up. And Missy writes in with this suggestion, William's apology to Harry, I'm sorry you married the wrong person, although I tried to warn you. Naughty Missy. Oh dear. Right back to my panel now. Now, Richard, we talked about the wonderful news before the comments about Catherine, but it hasn't been without controversy. Who's been saying what?
Well, it's this video, which is very different to the video in which Catherine announced that she was undergoing treatment and that she had cancer.
Very slick, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you think back to March, the video then was just incredibly simple, was just an address, really, was her sitting on the bench talking things through. But for whatever reason, this time they've decided to create a production, really. It was a super slick, glossy 3-minute video with music, very sort of emotional, and in which Catherine talked about what she's been through and everything. So it's a very unusual approach. Personally, I thought the video was very sweet. I enjoyed it, but it's really divided opinion. And the past week since then, I've been talking to people, various friends of the royals and courtiers and that sort of thing, and it really has divided people. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I mean, some people thought, well, it's great, it's innovative, it's sort of one for the Instagram generation or what other, but others have thought it was very mistaken, that it was very unregal. We'll see in this video, you've got them sort of William kissing Catherine and playing in the sand in the woods. And they feel it's just not the sort of thing that the royal family should be doing.
Also, a lot of people do get upset when they're normal, the royal family, don't they? I mean, I know you had some thoughts on all of this, didn't you, Rebecca?
Yeah, because I was seeing some of the comments, and I, like Richard, have been speaking to people about it all week. And I think what it boils down to is it's their story to tell. It's not my story. I can be a conduit of it, but ultimately it's her experience, it's her cancer journey. It's up to them how they want to present it. And they are just overjoyed as a family that they are in so much of a better place now than they were 6-9 months ago. Because as I said, in my piece earlier on this summer, this has been longer than just her cancer treatment. She wasn't very well in the run-up to her initial surgery in January. So it's been a tough year for the family. And they just want to share it. They're just so happy they want to share it. I mean, it is slick, and I think this kind of thing probably should be a bit of a one-off. I think it's not the kind of thing they should maybe do too regularly. But I think to impart such good news, people I've spoken to said, look, just take it for what it is. A family have got fantastic news to share. They hope it provides people in a similar position with a bit of hope as well. But she made the point of saying to them, look, I am with you. Hopefully, you will see that there is light at the end of a very long, dark tunnel as well.
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of the comments seem to be along the lines of, should the royals do this sort of thing? And I must admit, it's I don't want to use the word weird, it's the wrong word, but it's so startling to see them being affectionate with each other. It's such a strange thing for royalty, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, although I enjoyed it, I thought it was very sweet, I must admit it did make me uneasy, because it just felt it was this sort of attempt to create a sort of Hollywood style. I mean, it almost felt like a sort of Hollywood trailer. And lots of people have said to me, it's just the sort of thing that Meghan would have loved to do, obviously being an actress.
Oh, come on.
We don't want Catherine to turn into Meghan. The royal family should be different. They should be dignified and not chasing this, because yes, it's the way that Catherine might have wanted to tell her story, but she's surrounded by advisors and she's got people saying, we want to get loads of hits on YouTube or whatever. And I think the royal family should be above that. They don't need to be the Kardashians.
But maybe it's just a glimpse into William's reign, is that they want to connect more with the public. They want to be more human facing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I say, I can understand why it wasn't everybody's cup of tea, and I do completely get that. Although I do think actually it was a very honest look at their lives. I mean, I wrote in my piece this week, with William and Kate, pretty much what you see is what you get. A lack of tech with the kids. They spend a lot of time in the great outdoors, and that was actually very faithfully represented in this video. I mean, the royal family are definitely feeling their way in the social media age. We have seen, when it comes to royal communications, they have really upped their game in terms of the social media output, the videos they're doing. You'll notice now, at the end of anything, both Buckingham Palace and Kensington does, they have a kind of fancy logo.
Yes.
At the end, either Kensington Palace
looks a little bit like the Riviera Orchard one.
Oh, Joe!
It does. Yeah.
So they are getting more professional, upping their game. But I do see that it needs to be authentic as well. So I think it's one of these things that needs to be applied slightly carefully.
We should say it's not a one-off, because the team around William and Catherine have been really keen on making these style of videos, and we've discussed them here before. They did a sort of review of the year one last December, and they did quite a long video about the coronation and how the family featured in it. And again, it was this very slick style.
Well, our social team put together this clip comparing the video to footage of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip in 1960, which you viewers will see now. How do you think it compares to previous media moves by the royal family, Rebecca?
The trouble is, that was like 50 years ago. So
no, it wasn't. 1960 was 10 years ago. I won't hear anything else.
So clearly it's going to be different. We're in a very different media landscape. We have different viewing habits, we have different ways we get our news. You know, people, they often say people's attention span for these things are a lot shorter. People won't sit down and watch our traditional 10 o'clock news in the UK, but they will pick up bits on TikTok and Instagram and X and things like that. So I do think the royal family have to move with it, but I see Richard's point that it needs to be done in an authentic way, that it's not too over-stylised, because I think the danger is when you paint your life to be so perfect, when things don't go right, then you're kind of more open to criticism. But I still go back to my original point that, you know, it is their story to tell, and they're telling it in the way they feel comfortable. You know, don't forget, I mean, there was the very controversial documentary, was it in the 50s and 60s? I can't remember the timing. The 60s, the royal family. Yeah. You know, where people were shocked at the Queen Elizabeth for the first time let cameras follow them around, you know, going on picnics and barbecues at Balmoral, and, you know, sitting around the dinner table. And I think, you know, then Prince Charles was practicing the cello. I mean, that was pretty shocking at the time. Actually, when you look at it, it's not that different to what William and Kate have done now. It's just with a bit more gloss.
But we ought to say that Queen Elizabeth recognised that was a mistake, and it was actually withdrawn, that footage. You know?
It was, but then again, as I say, it was half a century ago, and I think things have moved on a bit since then.
Well, speaking of moving on, we heard about the King and Queen's travel plans earlier on, and apparently you reported this week that Harry and Meghan have plans for more of their, what people are dubbing their faux royal tours.
Well, they're certainly travelling a lot, yes. They've already been to Nigeria and Colombia this year, and they've made clear that they thought these trips were very successful, and it seems they're planning another one before the end of this year. This was
Where to?
According to Hello magazine, they're going to be making another trip in the autumn. Hello speculated they thought it was likely that it could be to Africa again, perhaps to Botswana and Lesotho, where Harry's charity Centre Barley is very active, so that one would make sense. But they think it's definitely going to happen this year. And it's a lot of foreign travel, very interesting.
Rebecca, some of their supporters might be moved to point out that they're doing more royal tours than William and Catherine.
Yeah, but William and Catherine haven't been able to do any trips. I mean, I think I revealed in December last year, I had an exclusive story that they were planning a trip to Rome, which everyone got very excited about, which was absolutely true. But they had to cancel that because of, you know, Catherine's health. So, you know, feel free to compare all you want on social media. I don't think anyone's going to listen to them because there's just such different sets of circumstances.
But also, yes, even, you know, putting those circumstances aside, William and Catherine don't like leaving the children, do they?
No, I think they're determined to make sure that they spend as much time with the children as possible, which is understandable. I mean, gone are the days when, you know, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went on a 6-month tour of the Commonwealth after the Queen took the throne. You know,
that's the way to do parenting, isn't it? It's just bugger off.
Yeah, it really is. You know, it's a different era. So, you know, if William and Catherine couldn't undertake foreign trips during the school holidays and take the children with them, then I think they would want them to be pretty short. But interesting. But remember, Harry and Meghan have children too. So.
Yes.
No, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say you're right, Richard. I mean, they've made a point now. If it's a trip that, you know, that's not in the holidays, they couldn't take the children with, and obviously it's less likely that they can the older they get. They definitely try to work them kind of more Monday to Friday if possible. And I know when we went to Pakistan with them before the COVID pandemic, we were literally on the plane waiting for them to race back from doing the school run to jump on the plane so we could all head off to Pakistan, and we were back Friday, kind of late Friday afternoon, so although they couldn't pick the kids up from school, they would be home for tea. And actually I, for one, as a working parent, I'm really supportive of that.
That's the thing, the whole plane would have been full of working parents, so that's great.
And exactly, that works brilliantly for us, because I've been on these big traditional royal tours that have taken me halfway around the world, you know, for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and have been sitting in my hotel room, you know, singing lullabies to my son. You know, it's tough for us, and it's you know, and it's tough for them. So I really admire that style of parenting, I have to say.
Excellent. Well, Richard, Meghan was back with OPRAH this week. Don't tell me there's another interview in the works. That did not go down well last time.
There's not another interview as far as we know. They were with OPRAH at the opening of a local bookshop in Montecito, where they live in California. Harry may have wanted to give up cutting ribbons and opening places in Britain, but he's now doing it there. And
sure.
Very subtly, there was a copy of, very prominent copy of Harry's book, Spare, just behind her as Meghan was giving a talk there. So there they are. They're available to open local stores.
Lovely. Well, more Prince Harry legal news now, Rebecca. He's still fighting the UK government over what he sees as his right to taxpayer-funded security.
Yep, so the Mail on Sunday revealed that there was a new date for this case. I mean, I won't even bore our viewers with all the twists and turns on this. Suffice to say, he has had his applications rejected and turned down and ruled against at every turn, is constantly appealing. Another appeal is going through, and that will be heard in April next year. So watch this space.
I mean, surely Harry must be bored with it by this point. Remind me where the King stands on this.
Well, this actually is really interesting, Joe, because of course it is awkward for the King, for His Majesty, that his son is suing his government in his courts. That's actually what this case boils down to. And actually, I've written a piece. I can't reveal too much, that should go in the paper in the next few days that touches on this, and it's difficult for him. And let's not forget, a few weeks ago, People magazine, which is one of Harry and Meghan's kind of chosen publications in the US, wrote a big piece about this, saying that Harry firmly believes his father has the ability to overrule and to get his security reinstated. And the point is repeatedly made that Charles does not have the power to do that.
Yeah.
And if he were to interfere, that would be a serious constitutional matter. And I just don't think Harry gets that, unfortunately.
In other news, Richard, there's been an update in the legal case over Harry's visa.
Yes, this is really interesting. It's the basis in which he's resident in the USA, and this a think tank had taken the American authorities to court, wanting to find out on what basis. What they really wanted to know is, what did he have to say about his past drug use, which he talked about in Spare, which is drug use is something which has to be declared when you want to enter the USA. Well, what's the latest development is the case has been declared closed, but no details have been given. But we do expect perhaps next week we'll get the details of who won the case.
Right, watch this space.
Yeah.
Well, moving on, with William and his face furniture back in Wales this week, we thought we'd look back at the strong connection and affection that he and his wife have for the country. Here are some of our favourite pictures of the Walesers in Wales. Some great ones there. Hope you enjoyed them. My thanks to Rebecca, Richard, and to you for watching. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.